Captain's Log. It's over. What's up? Welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, my favorite blind film critic, and today we're going to talk about Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, Season 1, Episode 10. It's the final episode. You guys get to know what my grade is. What's going up on the tomato meter. Cool, huh? Look at that. So, my final thoughts on Star Trek, Starfleet Academy. And when I was doing this, I kind of looked at what like other critics and other people. The interesting thing is that critics actually, this is like it's certified fresh with like an 88%. And I'm like, but why? But why? So in the final episode of this, um, they've just reunited Ashanti with Caleb, and she's upset because she's on a Federation ship, and meanwhile Holly Hunter's like, I don't have time for this because let me show you, let me explain. And it's because Paul Giamatti's, I forget what his character's name is, whatever, he's amassed this like wall of mines and then he boards their ship. Now they're able to hide the cadets inside of an airlock, so that way, they don't appear as life forms. So when Giamatti boards the ship, it ends up being like Holly Hunter, Ishtar, Tatiana Maslany's character, Caleb's mom, and Tig Notaro. Those are like the only three adults in the ship. So Giamatti's surprised to see everybody, and Holly Hunter just plays it off saying, oh, well, I promised Caleb that I would find his mother, and I did, so I went and got her. And so Giamatti takes the two of them and leaves Tig Notaro on the ship for reasons I don't understand or know, because to him, at this point, he's just like, if he took her, there would be nobody left on the ship. So why even bother? Like, why are you leaving her on the ship to cause any sort of problem? He leaves her alive on the ship too, which is kind of hilarious. It's just like none of this makes any sense. What is his name? Moose Baraka? Yeah, that's his name. Um, so so he takes the two of them, and they go back to like his ship, which has like dead cherry blossom trees in it. Was something that was in the audio description I thought was interesting. And but why? But why? So, and then his whole thing is this, there's this trial, right? And he's putting Hunter's character in the Federation on trial because he's got all these bombs set up that will apparently destroy like trillions of lives, multiple planets, just like an unwieldy amount of. Wasn't he a smuggler in episode one? This guy's got one hell of a learning curve, you know? Um, he has somehow managed to get all this stuff, all these materials, and set all of this up, and nobody noticed. Nobody stopped him. He just has this massive force behind him. So he tells his sob story about when he was a little kid and they were playing outside, and there were these Federation ships that would fly over, and they were giving aid to colonies that needed it, but they didn't give any aid to him, and his his mining colony needed it. And his dad one day, tried to shoot down a cargo ship or something like that, and it did not go well for them. I think that's how his dad died. So we learn that backstory, which is completely in conflict to the last time that he talked about his father. Remember when he was sitting there with Holly Hunter and he was like, when you grow up me, your dad gets to beat you all the time. And it's like, so now he's talking about his dad like he's a hero, totally not bringing up the fact that his dad beat him a lot when he was a kid. So I but he's made Ishtar, the Ashanti, whatever her name is, um, the judge and jury for Holly Hunter's character, They had like a moment where they hugged it out so that Holly Hunter could tell her that Caleb was alive, still on the ship, and they had a plan, and but that obviously Moose can't know, you know. So they go through the whole trial, and they argue back and forth, and Ashanti gets to say her piece, and looks like Moose has gotten the favor of all these other nations to turn it on the Federation, and then Caleb storms in because he's been on the other ship this whole time with Tig and the other recruits trying to keep the ship alive. Everybody's been doing their own thing. There was the Doctor was on the ship too, but he appears as a hologram. I didn't realize it was a hologram, but I guess he is a hologram. So Sam's been trying to fix him along with Jaden, because Jaden's skill sets are just whatever they need him to be, I guess. Um, Genesis is finally getting to live her life as the captain while Tig is trying to fix the core, the warp drive, uh, and that's basically it. Um, what's his face is driving, the annoying one is piloting, and I forget what the girlfriend is. Oh, the girlfriend's off with Caleb, and they're trying to like use her powers that she's not supposed to be using. But don't worry, she doesn't die. The whole speech about if you use your powers again, you die. That doesn't actually come true. She survives the season, and she'll make it into season 2. She removes her inhibitors so she can merge with Caleb, and they can find his mom, because that still is a priority for him, even though they're also trying to save trillions of lives on multiple planets simultaneously with only one Starfleet captain. I don't even know if she's a captain. Tig Notaro's character, I have no idea. Um, all of this improbabilities, and then Caleb ends up on the ship and is like, "Well, since you've summoned me, since you keep talking about me, figured I might as well show up." So Caleb, within seconds, just kind of stands there, and just then he says a little bit of shit to Moose, and then like all of the countries like click off, and they're like, "Oh no." Holly Hunter's like, "Well, I got some news for the countries, for these nations that are trying to follow you, and they don't want to follow him anymore." So he loses everybody. Then he goes to try to blow up the mines. It looks like, oh no, Tignataro and crew have stopped the mines. And the uh, the the backup has shown up, and the Starfleet swoops in and arrests Baraka and his people. And the end. So we cut to at the end. Ashanti is now living in the school with Caleb, as they're watching him as he grows into being a soldier, as he now realizes this is what he wants, and he has his found family and his friends. Everyone's happy. And they have to go to a special dinner and be honored for escaping and causing this whole thing to begin with. I don't know. There are 10 forks. Caleb's upset about it. And then we're done. We're out. The end. Next season on Starfleet Academy. So critics like the show because they say it's bold. It's a bold new take, and it's fresh and it's different. That doesn't always mean it's good though. Um, See, I can appreciate things for being bold new takes or taking a risk, and then also still thinking them as rotten. Like when I talk about films like Joker Folie à Deux or Megalopolis, um, here, a couple of those films, I at least praise them for taking a risk and for trying something different, because it makes it less boring. It makes it less boring than coming on here and being like, so Tyler Perry's latest movie sucked, like we knew it would, or hey, Jason Statham's in another boring action movie. Surprise. And guess what, guys? The next Strangers chapter isn't any good. I mean, there's so many like really boring, like dull, lifeless. And then when you look at films like War of the Worlds, where it's like low effort, you took something that could have had effort to it and you just did nothing with it, and you're like, well, it's the pandemic. It's like, it doesn't mean you have to make a large scale movie during the pandemic and then downscale it. So even if that movie had released in like 2020, 2021, it still would have sucked. Like the movie, just not a good movie. So, uh, yeah, when you fight stuff like that, but I don't think Starfleet Academy is that. Starfleet Academy is just following the mold that everything else has. What's the risk? What did they put Star Trek on it? Is that really the risk here? Because ever since these guys have been handed the reins of um of Star Trek at Paramount, what did they do? They did Discovery, right? And that was supposed to be just like every other Star Trek we've seen. Well, that didn't work. That didn't pull in enough eyes. So then they were like, well, let's trap nostalgia. Let's go for Picard. Let's bring people in with Picard, and that'll bring in all the people who watched The Next Generation, which it did. I watched Picard. Picard is like the one show that I go to bat for because I'm like, Patrick Stewart was great in that show. And some of the other actors that came in and out were pretty good. Brent Spiner had some really nice work on that show. So there was some stuff to like about Picard. It wasn't like amazing, amazing, but I did. It was probably the Star Trek show I've seen the most of in a long time. So kudos. And then, they did the Lower Decks thing where they just were like, well, what if Star Trek was adult animation? And then they did, oh, Prodigy. Well, what if Star Trek was for kids? And then they did Strange New Worlds where they're like, well, what if we retconned some stuff and went sort of back before and made things different in like a parallel universe? And now we're here with Starfleet Academy where they're like, well, what if Star Trek was for teens? What would that look like? What if it was a young adult novel? Because basically that's what this is. You have Caleb is Harry Potter. He is. I mean, he has issues with his parents. He goes to the school to learn how to be something. And he's the star of the show. He's the main feature. He walks in and people are like, ooh, it's Caleb. You know, comes from the most interesting background. He has no father, and his mother is presumably gone at the beginning of this thing, lost to some, prison colony, and he's trying to find her. And he's very much the Harry Potter of it, but he's also like annoyingly a Zach Morris, like because the show wants to lean so heavily into these old school tropes where they're doing everything from prank wars to drama class. He also becomes like a Zach Morris, but instead of hanging out at the Max, they just do sci-fi things, and he goes into his special little room and plays around with hacking a computer and trying to find his mom. So it's like a less interesting version of Saved by the Bell in space. And he he the thing is that Caleb ends up being a likable character because he's everything. He is the everyman of the show. He has to be just likable enough. He has to be just abrasive enough, right? He has to be just objectionable enough. But he also has to be charming enough because he has to be able to woo a girlfriend and win over the female audience. He has to be able to fight, right? He has to be able to fight just enough. He's not an overly amazing fighter. He doesn't kickbox or anything like that, but he can handle himself. But he can also hack. So he's also good with technology. He's also smart enough. He's never played for being stupid. So he's all of these things. They give him every single personality trait so that he can be the most accessible male lead ever. He's everything at the same time. And he's whatever the show needs him to be at any given point in time. And then his little crew of friends around him, the Saved by the Bell crew, I mean, there's so much Genesis is so much like Hermione. She seeks the intelligence and leadership. She has a little bit of her. There's a little bit of drama about her parentage, right? It's not quite the same as Hermione's, but she has a father who is this well-respected individual that she'll supposedly never live up to. You have somebody like Sam who feels like a Luna Lovegood, the quirky character that's supposed to like come in here. I would say Jaden is almost like a merging of Ron and Neville. He feels like he's the best friend character, but he also has the traits of Neville. So it's a very Neville Longbottomish character. Um, and the one kid is like a Draco, but like if Draco had some sort of redemption arc that was given to him, and so he could join Harry Potter's team instead of feeling like he was constantly on team Voldemort. And the girl with the powers, I don't know, was she like Cho Chang? I forget her name too. I'm not. I don't care. And then they throw in, so they're like, well, this is for teens. So it feels like the idea of what they thought Star Trek was, they're trying to meet an audience where they think they are. They're trying to meet an audience that they don't have where they think the audience is. And this is their answer. They're looking at a generation of youth who are used to short form content. They're used to um, we have a whole bunch of reality shows. I think reality shows are dumbing down television, and we're starting to see that in shows like Starfleet Academy and All's Fair are sort of really obvious examples of it. But I can see a lot of it happening and breeding into other TV shows too. I would argue that CIA is kind of like the dumbed down version of shows that have come before it. I honestly think Landman isn't that smart, but people love it, so I know that's going to get some flack. The female characters on that show are just written like poorly. There clearly is not a single female that has ever been in that writer's room. Even the guy that delivers food and coffee is probably a guy. That's a dude. It's like the Little Rascals, the He-Man Woman Haters Club is what's writing Landman. Um, so this show, it gets a lot of flack because supposedly woke culture has destroyed it. Has it? When you say that, the idea of, see, woke culture is the idea that that certain storylines are being pushed. Really, it was it the story? Was it the occasional mention? Because if anything, it feels like there was like a fleeting mention of queerness in one of the characters that they don't really go back to that often. They don't really mention Jaden and his preference, and we just kind of moved away from that. Um, so that can't be it. So what is it? The racial specificity of it? What's interesting about that is that the it doesn't really matter because of the alien races aspect of it. So when you have people playing races, when you have people playing aliens, nobody's really thinking about like, oh, is that a black Klingon or a white Klingon? Like, it's just not, it doesn't mean the same thing when you start going out in space. So diversity in Star Trek is sort of like a moot point. You would only be like fighting, I guess, gender norms by having, Holly Hunter being in charge, but she wouldn't be the first person in charge of a Star Trek show. So that doesn't make any sense. I don't really understand. Usually, when people say woke culture, it's a whole bunch of like cisgender straight white dudes who are like, where is our representation? It's like Caleb. Caleb is your representation. Caleb is in charge of the show. Caleb is written to be everything, everywhere, all at once. And this show still isn't good. And even if you replace it with a whole bunch of straight white dudes, Alan Ritchson just got cloned and put into every single character in the show. The writing still isn't good. It's just not good. It's just not good writing. When you see what they do with Moose Braca, in one scene where he's talking about his father having beaten him, and then when we see him in the finale, he's like, "My father, the hero," and it's like, pick a lane, bro. Pick a lane. So nothing here really makes any sense. They go to the trouble of giving us this big thing about her removing her inhibitor and how if she does it, she'll die. She does it, she doesn't die. I mean, there's so many things that happen that they don't care about. They don't have the risk. Nothing ever lands. Nothing's ever a risk. Zero stakes, you know. And the acting is I mean, it's hit and miss depending on, not really to the fault of any of the actors. It's just the fault of the writing. The writing that they're being given is just kind of lackluster. Giamatti is the only one who's doing it right because he understands what kind of show he's on. So he's like overplaying it. I think he knows he's on a campy piece of whatever, and his performance is far over the top. He is chewing the scenery. He is staging everything, and it's fantastic to watch Giamatti in this because it feels like he didn't get enough to do when he was Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2. So he's living his best life. Like, he's so often required to be like the best actor, the straightest actor, like the straight man character. And then here he gets to just live freely, and he's eating that up every moment. So I don't think this is a good show. I don't. And while I'm not a Trekkie diehard through and through, I've seen enough Star Trek. I've seen enough of the originals, and I I mentioned this in my first one. I don't think I've seen every single Star Trek film that featured the the crew of the Enterprise. Um, and Shatner's all the way through. I think I've seen all of the ones with the Next Generation crew because I've seen Generations on Forward, and I think I've seen all of those. I don't remember them that well. First Contact to me is kind of like a blur, but I was like in middle school when that came out, so high school, middle school. Same thing with Generations. The only reason I remember Generations is because it brought the two casts together. So First Contact was the first one with just the Next Generation cast, and to me, it's like less memorable than like Nemesis, which wasn't that great of a movie. I do like what J.J. Abrams did with the franchise. Those three movies, I did enjoy them. They were a different vibe. The Paramount Plus series is I've seen all of them and given up on all of them. So I will be eventually giving up on this too. I don't know that I'd come back for a second season. I definitely would not come back if I had no Paul Giamatti. Like if he was a one season wonder and decided to go on and do something else with his life, you need to woo me back because there's nothing else here. There's no here. I didn't really enjoy the series. I didn't really enjoy the season. Um, the audio description, as somebody who, kind of is casually a fan of Star Trek, it's like, yeah, I know what a Klingon looks like, but some of these other characters, I felt like I needed more description of every alien race. They're like some alien races where they're in everything, and so you get used to knowing what a Klingon and a Vulcan and a Borg are, but do you know what every other race is? It's like some of these I just didn't know. The hologram stuff I feel like needs better explanation because sometimes they can touch something, sometimes they can't. Sometimes people are touching them, sometimes they're not. At least that's what I'm getting audio description when somebody wraps their arm around Sam. It's like, well, wouldn't your arm go through Sam? Like it doesn't make any sense. So, not a big fan of the show. And I don't understand the love for it. I don't understand the desire to say, oh, it's wildly different and it's a big swing and they're taking a huge risk. Are they? Are they? Or are they just applying Star Trek to the same formula that's been working for everybody else? Did they just look at the young adult formula and go, hey, why not? Why not us too? Why can't we have that? Because a risk would be actually doing something nobody else has done before. A risk isn't doing what everybody else is doing and then figuring out how you do that. That's not a risk. Just because your series hasn't done that before. Like, if I don't know if Star Trek did like a Sesame Street version of the show, and people are like, that's such a risk for the show. It's like, is it that they're doing like a show that's aimed at kids that's matching a preschool formula? Or are they just using Star Trek characters to teach kids how to count? And it's just like an expansion of the brand. Because you can't copy other things and then be called a risk. You can't be derivative of 100 different things that have done what you did and done it better, and then also be called a bold new take. Like it's just not. That's not what it is. So, um, I think it's a slight swing for the series, I guess you could say, in so much that it's not like the previous Star Trek series, but that also doesn't necessarily inherently make it good. You know, uh, like I said, if you made a preschool show with Star Trek, like with puppets and stuff, and you're like, no, guys, we're in space. Hey, kids, this is the letter A. Can you say A? Like, is that going to make Star Trek good? So, no, it doesn't always mean that something ends up being good. So, but I also push back on a whole bunch of people who are like, it's woke culture killed the show. No, it didn't. Shut up, sit down. Somewhere in between is where the end of it was, where the conversation is the fact that the show just isn't good enough. The show just is. There are better versions of this show being done by other people, and yeah, they're not Star Trek, but there are better versions, better young adult books, films, television shows that are being done by other people. And for somebody to look at what's hot right now with this target demographic and to look at shows like Ginny and Georgia, My Life with the Walter Boys, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and to think that now is the time that Starfleet Academy is going to pull in that audience. It's like, do you see the kind of shows that they're watching? Because I don't think they're watching this. So I think instead you have a whole bunch of adults who don't understand why there's a teenage version of Star Trek. And while I love watching the other shows too, again, I would prefer watching Jenny and Georgia. I would prefer watching The Semi Turned Pretty. I would prefer watching My Life with the Walter Boys, even though that's the less of the three. I would prefer watching those. None of those are great shows. But all three of those are better than this because they know what they are, they know how to appeal to their audience, and they're meeting their audience where they are. Star Trek thinks it is. Star Trek Starfleet Academy thinks it is. It's the dad that thinks he's cool, but he's really not. I'm gonna give Star Trek Starfleet Academy a 3.1 out of 10 rotten. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Live long and prosper. I'll see you guys on the other side.